Whether you're starting your day with coffee or catching up on the drive home, we've got some eye-opening insights about how artificial intelligence spending is literally reshaping the American economy and what it means for every aspect of transportation and mobility. I'm Steve, part of the Agentic team.
And I'm Claire, also with Agentic. Thanks for tuning in to Auto Intelligence. We drop new episodes every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. Steve, when I first saw these numbers about AI infrastructure spending, I had to double-check them because they seemed almost impossible to believe.
So here's the headline that should grab everyone's attention. For the first time in modern economic history, capital expenditures on AI data centers have contributed more to GDP growth than all U.S. consumer spending combined. We're talking about a $152 billion contribution to GDP from AI infrastructure versus just $77 billion from consumer spending growth. That's not just remarkable, it's unprecedented.
And to put that in perspective for our automotive audience, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, and Meta alone are forecasting a record $364 billion in capital investment for 2025, with the vast majority going toward AI data center construction. That's more than the entire global automotive industry spends on research and development in a typical year.
Exactly. And what's fascinating is how directly this connects to what we're seeing in automotive. Connected and autonomous vehicles generate between 1 and 40 terabytes of data per hour. Every single one of those terabytes needs to be processed in real time, which means the autonomous vehicle revolution is completely dependent on this AI infrastructure build-out.
That dependency goes even deeper than most people realize. Level 4 autonomous vehicles require end-to-end latency below 10 milliseconds, which is only achievable when GPU clusters are positioned within 50 miles of major metropolitan areas. So we're not just talking about centralized data centers. We need edge computing infrastructure in every major city where autonomous vehicles will operate.
And that's driving what economist Paul Kudrowski calls the infrastructure boom of our time. He estimates that AI capital expenditures are now approaching 2% of total U.S. GDP and rising rapidly. To put that in historical context, that's approaching the 2.6% of GDP that railroad investment reached at its 1854 peak.
The railroad comparison is particularly interesting because, like railroads, this infrastructure isn't just supporting one industry, it's creating entirely new economic possibilities. But there's a crucial difference. Unlike railroads that were built to last decades, AI data centers are short-lived, rapidly depreciating assets requiring continuous hardware upgrades.
That depreciation cycle is something every automotive executive needs to understand. When you're planning a 10-year vehicle development program that depends on AI capabilities, you're betting on infrastructure that might be completely obsolete in 5 years. Data center equipment depreciates at 5 to 10% annually due to rapid technological obsolescence.
Which brings us to the scale of what's actually being built. Data centers now consume approximately 4.4% of total US electricity consumption, with projections suggesting this could reach 11 to 12% by 2030. The largest facilities require over 100 megawatts of power, enough to supply approximately 80,000 households.
And here's where it gets really interesting for automotive applications. AI training workloads demand specialized facilities with power densities reaching 130 kilowatts per rack compared to 40 kilowatts for traditional data centers. Some projections suggest they could reach 250 kilowatts per rack.
Those power requirements are creating massive bottlenecks. In many markets, it takes 4 years or more to extend high-capacity power lines to new development sites. Lead times to power new data centers in major markets like Northern Virginia now exceed 3 years.
So while everyone's excited about the potential of autonomous vehicles and connected mobility, we might actually be constrained by electrical grid capacity long before we're constrained by technology capabilities. That's a supply chain vulnerability that most automotive strategists aren't factoring into their planning.
And speaking of supply chain vulnerabilities, the automotive industry's semiconductor demand is forecast to triple by 2030, driven by advanced driver assistance systems, infotainment, and battery management AI. Bain & Company is warning that a 20% AI-driven jump in GPU demand could provoke a new global chip shortage as early as 2026.
Auto manufacturers are already responding defensively. They're over-ordering chips by 10 to 20% to hedge against shortages, which ties up working capital and elongates design cycles. This defensive behavior is actually creating artificial demand spikes that could make shortage conditions worse.
Now let's talk about the vehicle-to-everything infrastructure that's being built in parallel. Federal and state agencies have earmarked $6.4 billion for V2X roadside communication units, prioritizing applications like bus lane management and pedestrian alert systems.
The market projections are staggering. The US V2X market, valued at $4.1 billion in 2024, is projected to reach $89 billion by 2032, representing a compound annual growth rate of 36%.
But here's the challenge that could derail everything. There are currently 15 different V2X protocols globally, which threatens to fragment the market and reduce interoperability. This is similar to what happened with early cellular technology deployments.
That fragmentation risk is something the industry really needs to address. Network effects are crucial for V2X systems to achieve their full potential. Pilot programs have demonstrated congestion reductions of 25% in Singapore-style implementations, but those benefits only materialize with widespread compatible deployment.
You're listening to Auto Intelligence, brought to you by Agentic, the platform transforming automotive retail with intelligent, human-centered AI. What sets Agentic apart in this AI infrastructure boom is our focus on practical, immediately deployable solutions that work within existing dealer operations rather than requiring massive infrastructure investments.
Now back to our discussion. One area where AI infrastructure and automotive are converging in really interesting ways is electric vehicle charging. AI-optimized smart charging platforms are analyzing grid load conditions, dynamic electricity pricing, and individual driver route patterns to optimize charging timing.
And increasingly, electric vehicle charging networks are co-locating micro data centers at charging depots to enable real-time participation in electricity markets. These AI systems can reduce charging infrastructure requirements by 20 to 30% through better load balancing and demand prediction.
That's potentially billions in capital expenditure savings as EV adoption accelerates. But there's a potential conflict brewing. The electricity demands of both data centers and EV charging infrastructure may create grid capacity conflicts, particularly during peak demand periods.
Exactly, and this is where the regional economic impacts become really important. A single hyperscale data center can generate approximately $32.5 million annually in local economic activity and support around 157 local jobs. But these benefits come with significant costs.
The tax incentive competition is intense. Currently, at least 42 states either offer sales tax exemptions for data centers or have no sales tax at all. Texas and Virginia have each forgone over $700 million in tax exemptions annually, while Illinois, Georgia, and others report hundreds of millions in annual tax expenditures.
But here's what's really concerning from an employment perspective. Operational data centers are highly automated and typically require only 50 to 100 permanent employees, even though construction phases can temporarily employ over 1,000 workers. So the employment benefits are front-loaded and temporary.
This employment pattern is part of a broader trend. The World Economic Forum's Future of Jobs Report 2025 reveals that 40% of employers expect to reduce their workforce where AI can automate tasks. Technology trends, including AI and information processing, are projected to create 11 million jobs while simultaneously displacing 9 million others.
Manufacturing faces particularly acute disruption. Studies show that adding one robot to a production process displaces an average of 6.6 workers. Oxford Economics estimates that robots could replace up to 20 million manufacturing jobs globally by 2030.
But the displacement effects aren't uniform across education levels. Only 3% of workers with less than a high school diploma work in roles considered most exposed to AI job losses, suggesting that educational attainment provides some protection.
Now, let's talk about what this means for automotive supply chains. Manufacturers are deploying AI-powered control towers to monitor multi-tier supplier networks, weather patterns, and port disruptions, enabling shortage predictions weeks in advance.
BMW's Cartwork system allows vehicles in production to detect missing parts and autonomously navigate to appropriate parking areas, demonstrating the integration of manufacturing and IoT connectivity. These AI systems are reducing supply chain disruption costs by 15 to 25% through better demand forecasting and inventory optimization.
However, the concentration of AI processing in hyperscale data centers creates new single points of failure. If these facilities experience outages, they could disrupt global automotive production in ways we've never seen before.
Which brings us to the sustainability concerns. With data centers projected to consume 11 to 12% of total U.S. electricity by 2030, the carbon footprint could reach 100 million tons of CO2 equivalent annually unless renewable energy deployment accelerates dramatically.
And then there's water consumption. Large data center campuses require up to 5 million litres per day for cooling systems. This demand competes directly with water-intensive industries like lithium processing for EV batteries, particularly in arid regions where both industries are expanding.
The financial sustainability question is probably the most critical. An estimated 1.8 billion people use AI services regularly, but only approximately 3% pay for premium AI services. This monetization gap represents a critical vulnerability in the AI investment thesis.
Enterprise adoption faces similar challenges. While 78% of firms now deploy AI in at least one function, measurable productivity gains and returns on investment remain elusive. Vanguard research suggests it would take $1 trillion in AI-related spending to push economic growth in 2025 above the trend of roughly 2%.
And here's what really concerns economists. If the AI bubble bursts, the consequences could be severe. Unlike previous technology bubbles that primarily affected investors and technology workers, the current AI infrastructure boom has become so central to GDP growth that a collapse could trigger broader economic contraction.
The historical parallels are both instructive and concerning. The telecommunications boom during the dot-com era involved cumulative investments exceeding $1 trillion. The overbuilding created a fiber glut that took nearly a decade to absorb, and the eventual crash contributed to the 2001 to 2002 recession.
But there are crucial differences. Economic historians have found that the most dangerous bubbles involve a combination of asset price inflation and credit expansion. The current AI boom is primarily financed through corporate cash flows and bond markets rather than bank debt, potentially limiting systemic financial risks.
The capital market effects are already substantial. Over 50% of global venture capital funding went to AI startups in 2024, totaling $131.5 billion, a 52% year-over-year increase. Money flooding into AI is being diverted from other sectors, including traditional manufacturing investment and consumer-facing technology development.
Private equity is making unprecedented moves. Blackstone's $16 billion acquisition of data center operator AirTrunk represents the largest private equity deal in the sector's history. The global AI infrastructure investment partnership, backed by BlackRock, Blackstone, Microsoft, and NVIDIA, aims to raise $80 to $100 billion specifically for AI data centers.
This massive capital reallocation may be masking the economic impact of other factors. Without AI infrastructure spending, GDP might have actually contracted given other macroeconomic headwinds, suggesting the economy has become dangerously dependent on this single sector.
Looking internationally, Canada has announced billions in investments to build domestic AI compute capacity, while European Union initiatives focus on AI sovereignty. The geographic distribution of AI infrastructure could determine long-term economic advantages in the same way that railroad networks shape 19th century development patterns.
So, what does all this mean for the automotive industry? First, autonomous vehicle timelines are directly tied to AI infrastructure deployment. Second, the semiconductor supply chain faces unprecedented strain. Third, the integration of smart charging and grid management creates both opportunities and risks.
And fourth, supply chain AI tools are becoming essential for competitiveness, but they create new dependencies on hyperscale infrastructure providers. Automotive companies need to factor these infrastructure dependencies into their strategic planning.
What really stands out to me is how this AI infrastructure boom is creating a new layer of the economy that didn't exist 5 years ago. Every connected vehicle, every smart charging station, every supply chain optimization system now depends on this infrastructure that's consuming more electricity than entire countries.
Exactly, and the speed of change is remarkable. We've gone from AI being a research curiosity to AI infrastructure spending exceeding consumer spending contribution to GDP in less than a decade. That's a pace of economic transformation that we haven't seen since the railroad era.
The question for automotive leaders is whether they're prepared for both the opportunities and the risks. The opportunities include dramatically improved supply chain efficiency, optimized charging infrastructure, and eventually fully autonomous transportation systems.
But the risks include supply chain dependencies on a concentrated set of infrastructure providers, potential energy grid conflicts between data centers and EV charging, and the possibility that an AI bubble burst could disrupt the entire transportation transformation we're counting on.
I think the most important takeaway is that automotive executives can't think about AI as just another technology upgrade. This infrastructure build-out is creating the nervous system for the entire 21st century economy. Transportation and mobility are going to be completely integrated into this system.
Which means that understanding AI infrastructure economics isn't optional for automotive strategy. It's essential. The companies that navigate this transition successfully will be those that understand not just how to use AI, but how to manage their dependence on AI infrastructure providers.
For me, the most fascinating aspect is how this connects everything together. Your autonomous vehicle's ability to navigate safely depends on the same data centers that are optimizing the electrical grid for your EV charging and managing the supply chain for vehicle production. It's all one interconnected system now.
And that interconnectedness creates both resilience and fragility. When it works, it enables capabilities that seemed like science fiction just a few years ago. But when there are failures, they cascade across multiple systems in ways we're still learning to understand.
That's why episodes like this matter. We need to understand the infrastructure beneath the innovation. The flashy stuff, the autonomous vehicles, the smart charging, the AI-optimized supply chains, only works because of this massive, largely invisible infrastructure build-out that's reshaping the entire economy.
Well said, Claire. The AI infrastructure revolution is happening whether we understand it or not. But our ability to navigate it successfully depends on paying attention to both the opportunities and the risks. For automotive industry leaders, that means thinking beyond just vehicle technology to understand the entire ecosystem that modern transportation depends on.
This has been Auto Intelligence, produced by the team at Agentic. We'd like to thank our producer, Barry Hillier, co-founder and CEO of Agentic AI, for bringing together the research that makes conversations like this possible. And a special thanks to Agentic co-founder Bill Playford for suggesting and inspiring this episode. His insights into how AI infrastructure impacts automotive strategy were invaluable in shaping today's discussion.
Barry's always looking for exciting new topics and companies shaping mobility and transportation transformation. If you'd like to reach out with suggestions for future episodes or share your thoughts on today's discussion, email us at barry@autoagentic.ai. Understanding how AI infrastructure affects automotive isn't just about staying informed. It's about staying competitive in an industry that's being transformed from the ground up.
Learn more about Agentic at autoagentic.ai. New episodes drop every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. Until next time, thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the infrastructure revolution that's reshaping everything about how we move.